Okay, so Gamba Malgun Gamba Nani Gianandu, which is good evening. It's good to see you in Barragum, which is the traditional language of the community that I grew up on the Darling Downs. And good evening, everyone. It's terrific to have you here at State Library this evening. I'm Vicky McDonald, and it's my great privilege to be the State Librarian and CEO here at the State Library of Queensland. And on behalf of my colleagues, I welcome you to Portrait of an Artist. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their continuing connection to land and as custodians of stories for millennia. We're certainly inspired by this tradition in our work to share and preserve Queensland's history for future generations. I'd also like to extend a really warm welcome to tonight's speakers, artists Bonita Ely and Angela Goddard. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'd also like to welcome James Sourris and Marika Sourris, long-term generous supporters of State Library, Dr. Jodie Saganto, member of the Library Board of Queensland. Hi there, Jodie. And also our colleague from across the Queensland Cultural Centre, Chris Saines, Director of Queensland Art Gallery, Gallery of Modern Art. Thank you for joining us this evening. And welcome to everybody. It's certainly terrific to have you here this evening. Tonight we celebrate the story of a trailblazer, feminist, environmentalist, sculptor, painter, performer and academic, Dr. Bonita Ely. Born in 1946, Bonita was raised on the banks of the Murray River. Her family grew oranges and grapes in the Mallee region of Victoria on a block her father was allocated as part of Australia's soldier settlement scheme after the Second World War. Though unable to provide her with pencils and paints, her parents encouraged her creativity. By the river, Bonita took her first steps into the world of art as a young child. Using charcoal or sticks, she traced images and patterns in the river's rich soil deposits. The mighty Murray, one of the longest rivers in the world, would emerge as a recurring theme throughout her career. It was while studying in Melbourne in the 1960s that Bonita was influenced by the Fluxus movement, which was all about experimentation and challenging the traditions of art. Graduating from Prahran College of Fine Arts in 1969 with a diploma in sculpture, she lived in the United Kingdom and New York for 5 years in her early career. There, the rise of feminism and environmentalism ignited an enduring passion in the young artist. From the mid-1970s, Bonita became known for her challenging performance work and immersive installations. For one performance, she measured and mixed water pollutants to create Murray River Punch. For another, she cast her nude body in a slab of dough for breadline, a work exploring perceptions of womanhood and pregnancy. 3 decades later, Bonita continues to put her body on the line. Some of her recent work involved floating in the Menindee Lakes, surrounded by dead fish after a mass fish kill. During a stellar academic career, she has taught sculpture, performance and installation studies to generations of art students. Bonita retired from teaching in 2017, but she continues to pursue her artistic ambitions. Her works are held in national and international collections, including the Museum of Modern Art in New York and the National Gallery of Australia. They have been selected for important exhibitions such as Documenta 14 in Germany and Fieldwork, which marked the opening of the Ian Potter Centre for Australian Art at the National Gallery of Victoria. Bonita's is one of the fascinating oral histories we hold in the James C. Sourris AM collection of artist interviews held here at State Library. Those interviews feature in our current exhibition, Meet the Artist, which is in its final days, so it actually closes on Sunday. So we're keeping the SLQ gallery open this evening so that you can drop in and take a look. So it's on level 2 as you're leaving this evening. There is also the opportunity to purchase the impressive hardcover Meet the Artist catalogue, which is authored by curator Julie Ewington, or books by the artists at our pop-up shop at tonight, which is just outside the door. I also encourage you to come back to State Library to explore the stories of Aboriginal stockmen and women in Kirill Dargan's latest showcase, Working Country. As we engage in truth-telling and healing on Queensland's path to treaty, we are seeking to amplify First Nations stories, to reckon with the injustices of the past, to listen and to learn. Tonight, Portrait of an Artist conversation will be led by Angela Goddard, a writer, curator and expert on Australian art. Angela is Director of Griffith University Art Museum, Chair of University Art Museums Australia, and sits on the board of Sheila, a foundation for women in visual art. She is closely acquainted with Bonita's work and that of the artists featured in the James C. Sourris AM collection of the artist interviews. She curated the Bonita Ely Future Tense exhibition at Griffith University Museum of Art, interviewed Leonard Brown for the Sourris collection, conversed with Vernon Arkey for Portrait of an Artist, and also co-edited publications with Gordon Hookey and Richard Bell. So fantastic. We were using Slido tonight for tonight's Q&A session, and at the end of the conversation you'll see that this QR code will come up as well. So you can use the QR code to put your questions in, and it is very democratic. You can vote for other people's questions and they'll come to the top, and then Angela will do her best to answer as many questions as well. This is our second Portrait of an Artist event for 2023, and as I've said earlier, this series would not be possible without the generous support of James C. Sourris AM and his sister Marika, who are amongst our guests this evening, but also, of course, some of the library's greatest supporters. And their support is enabling us to build an incredible documentary record of Queensland artists, a unique resource that is invaluable for future generations, and we believe to be a world-class resource that we're offering to the people of Queensland. But before tonight's conversation, I invite you to enjoy Bonita's digital story with interviewer Julie Ewington, and we'll play that now for you, and then we'll have the conversation. Thank you.
When I was a tiny little kid, you know, before I went to school, I used to draw all over everything.
What do you mean everything?
Well, the hut.
The hut?
I wasn't allowed to draw on the walls in the house.
But you drew on the walls outside the house?
Yes, we had a picker's hut, we called it. I used to go and get charcoal where Mum used to throw it into the garden.
Because you had a wood stove inside.
Yes, a wood stove.
Of course.
And so I used the charcoal. You know, my parents didn't buy me pencils and paints and things, so I used charcoal.
Whatever you could.
Yeah.
So basically you were just always a maker at home when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was.
Did you go into the Mildura Art Centre and have a look at any art in there? Because that's your nearest regional art gallery.
Well, actually, the first gallery I ever went into was at Castlemaine. My father had a brother who lived in Castlemaine. We went to stay with him for a while. And I was in wonder. I was in magic land. Wow! Oh, all these paintings. Whoa! Oh.
How old were you?
I think I was about 7.
Okay.
Yeah. It was just
fabulous. So at the end of school, what was the plan after school? Were you going to stay in Robinvale or?
Oh, hell no. I was ready to get out of there. It was just so, everyone knew you for a start, so you couldn't be anonymous, you know. I think it's really important for artists to be anonymous so they can look at things, look at people, stare at them. Anyway.
All right, so in 69 you graduate, you're a young artist, you're living in Melbourne.
Yes.
And you start to exhibit.
Well, no, I left. I jumped on a ship and went to England. I couldn't bear it. Australia was like a dead end as far as art goes, as far as I could see. There was no support from government. The Australia Council hadn't been established. That was Gough, and so on. So, you know, I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Yeah.
So how long were you away? And
I was away for 5 years. In London for 2.5 years. And the partner I was with, who wrote the music for Sunset Video, he wanted to go back to New York, so we went back to New York together. So I was in New York for 2.5 years.
Just working part-time and making art.
Yeah.
So you made a video. What else were you making at that time?
Well, it was very much orientated towards environmental issues. I was also very aware of feminism at that time. I made this fabulous sculpture of my partner made out of pink toilet paper, and he was in a bath, and it was called Bathtub Superstar. Anyway.
So it's a classic role reversal.
Yes. Yeah.
So you came back to Melbourne in what, 1974, 5? 1975.
Yeah.
And you took up your life there.
Yeah.
And in fact, the first time I encountered you, I think, was in Adelaide, where you showed the Locust people.
Right.
You showed at home at the Locust people in the Post-Object Art in Australia show at the EAF. And that work is now in the collection of the Queensland Art Gallery.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of, as far as I could see at the time, you kind of erupted with this very elaborate work. But of course, now we've been talking to you, we can see how various works have fed into that over the years.
Yeah.
Particularly that you had worked in London and New York with the figure.
Yeah.
Yes, with the body.
Yes, quite.
If I was going to ask you one question to sum it all up, where did all this art come from?
Well, life experience, and the Fluxus movement was a great influence. And probably, I feel as if I'm a Fluxus artist, really.
So life experience, Fluxus, how does that work?
Just how liberating the Fluxus movement was. You could do anything. You could be out in the street, you could be out in a tree, in a gallery, you could be directing friends, whatever. Very, very liberating. It wasn't about making art objects to be put on into a white box. And so that suited me fine. It really did.
Well, hi everyone. Thanks so much for that introduction earlier, Vicky. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathering here tonight in NAIDOC Week, the Yagara and Turrbal peoples, and to acknowledge their elders and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here tonight. Dr. Bonita Ely, it's fabulous to have you here to talk a little more and unpack some of the beautiful tidbits that you gave us in the extracted version of the longer video interview, which goes into some of these issues in much more detail. And I suppose we also have a few slides which will be running throughout our discussion of many of your works throughout the years. But I wanted to perhaps start where Julie finished in that interview, in terms of talking about Fluxus and the impact on your work. I'm work for a university. I'm deeply interested in arts education and pedagogies, and I'm interested in the impact of the Fluxus approach on your work. Because you didn't encounter Fluxus for the first time when you moved overseas. It was actually here in Australia, thanks to a teacher.
Yes.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about that introduction to the Fluxus movement.
Well, I started out studying painting because that's what we did at school. And then I taught for 1 year after 2 years at art school. And English people know what English teachers know what they're teaching. Science teachers know what they're teaching. But if you're teaching art, what are you teaching? And I had a very deep thought about that. And for me, art is a form of communication. We communicate through aesthetics, through the visual, through the kinesthetic, through touch, through smell. And so that's the approach that I took teaching the kids. And we used to go down the rubbish tip to get materials to make sculpture out of. Can you imagine doing that now? And so when I went back to art school after that 1 year teaching, all of my paintings started to become three-dimensional. So the painting department kicked me downstairs into the sculpture department. And Clive Murray White the English artist, had just migrated to Australia, and he was teaching in the Parenthood College of Fine Arts. And his approach to teaching was just get out there and bang up a bit of art, which suited me fine. And also, his first artwork, I think, when he came to Australia, was a work of smoke, where he smoked an
He
environment.
made it here at the University of Queensland.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
Very
and in
ephemeral
Melbourne too,
work.
I think.
Mm.
So he was really very supportive of us all and treated us all as if we were going to be artists. Whereas in the first art school that I went to, Caulfield Technical College, it was called, one of the teachers that I really respected, he was teaching a sculpture, told me I'd never make it.
Well, where's he now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so anyway, so that, and in London I saw an exhibition by Ed Kienholz. You know, a wonderful survey show. You might be familiar with his artwork, The Backseat Dodge. But his works were so haptic and so to do with the body, you know, not just the body in the artwork, but also the body of the viewer. You felt like you were inside the artwork. And that really was something that I related to very strongly. And yeah.
So Fluxus gave you this armature as well with which to encounter other works of art. And of course, Fluxus is very anti-establishment. You know,
Yes.
it's anti-capitalist. It's resisting the commercialization of the art world as well. You just find very few things that are for sale, or even indeed objects you can take away and place in galleries. So that gave you that language that you had almost ready to take with you when you got out of Australia.
Yeah, true.
For 5 years you left. And then in London and New York, you're encountering more vibrant art worlds than what you'd found here, or what did you find?
Well, I guess it's more, you know, when you go to London, you're going to a place that's got this massive history, and the pollution there was just horrendous, and the class system was really horrifying to me too. I actually got involved with a kind of cooperative organised by a lecturer that I knew from Australia in the Architecture Association, which is the architecture college there, back then maybe still. And he organised for the London council, I can't remember what the exact name for it, but there were these empty Victorian mansions in a row alongside a park, and they were going to be demolished. So he negotiated that his students have access to these mansions, and he wanted an artist in the group as well, and I was the artist. And the other condition was that they would provide accommodation for single mothers. So I got to know very intimately women who were, you know, definitely on the lower rung of the class system in London. And at the same time, I met
a couple of people who were from the aristocracy, and it was just so bizarre, you know, coming from Australia to see how that all worked. Yeah.
So you're picking up on themes of environmental damage and degradation, pollution,
Also,
social, political
yeah,
themes
exactly.
as well, and
Yeah.
those affecting yourself as a woman too. And then you moved to New York, which is just as polluted at that time, and that's something you pick up on really strongly as well.
If not worse. And I was, my partner at the time was from a very wealthy family, and we lived on the top story of his father's multi-story business building, and looking out over the Hudson River, Staten Island, and the Statue of Liberty. And every day I witnessed the sunsets that were spectacular colour-wise, but that was because the air was so polluted. So I took photographs of the sunsets, and it turned into this kind of time-based series of photographs. I think in the end I had about 100 photographs of the sunsets. And yeah, it became very much part of the Locust people installation, yeah.
So yes, that leads us to the Locust people. So you come back to Australia in 1975, and there's a big group show on post-object art in Adelaide, and you show this tableau. It's a diorama work with the figure, with this monstrous, futuristic family of half humans, half locusts. You know, the humans have evolved into these creatures.
Well, sort of. It actually, the origin of the idea was going to the British Museum and seeing all the amazing mythological beasts from Egyptian, Greek, and Italian and ancient practices. And it got me thinking, what creature would we join with the human form to express our zeitgeist? And I decided, locusts. They just devour everything, wreck everything. Yeah, and they're a plague, you know, and we're pretty much a plague, I think. Anyway, that was the origin of the idea, and it became quite complex because they're sitting in a lounge room surrounded by imagery from nature, because we all love nature. Yeah, we love nature. We've got gardens and we've got floral patterns, and oh, it's wonderful. I love nature. So they were in this living room watching polluted sunsets on television, and my partner at the time, Mark Friedman, he was a composer and musician, and he'd got himself a Moog synthesizer. So he composed this wonderful music to go with the sunsets. It's kind of eerie, but it's also got a kind of rhythm of the modern city, the modern life as well. And the male is dressed in grey. I wonder where that came from. And he's a puppet, so he can be manipulated like a puppet. And his partner, his wife, I guess I should say, is all lovely pink, beautiful pink. And they snuggle up together on the couch, and they've got a little darling baby girl who's also pink like her mummy. Yeah.
But it's a confronting work, you know, there's these elements of...
She's a doll, he's a puppet. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this, and they're in a domestic scene, but it's a monstrous scene as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I did some paintings as well.
You did.
Yeah, one of the paintings is called Itchy Feet, and they're on the bed in this yoga pose where you lean back on your buttocks and put your legs up, and your partner does the same, and you grab each other's legs. Do you know that?
Should we demonstrate it?
We could. And yeah, so they've got a thing about feet, really, and out in you can see through the window of their bedroom that the sunset's really terrible. Yeah.
I want to come back to this interspecies mixture later because it kind of continues throughout your work. But so that work was made in 1975, and I first encountered it in 2014 when I was working at the Queensland Art Gallery, and James Sourris was brave enough to buy it for the gallery's collection. How did it feel? I mean, that's 4 decades later that a work that you'd made, you know, in a very specific context.
Yeah.
What happened to it during those 4 intervening decades?
Oh well, fortunately, I was able to, you know, store it and keep hold of it. Yeah.
And to unpack it and represent it. I remember seeing it at Bellis Milani Gallery and encountering it there, and the that very physical presence and feeling your own body in relationship to these other bodies was very direct.
Because one of the reasons why I wanted to put the video inside the space, I always tilted the video or the television set away a bit so that people had to actually go inside the space to watch the video. And back then it was outrageous. Works like that were actually called environmental art back then because the artist was creating an environment. It wasn't called environmental art because the theme was about nature. It was because the artist was creating an environment. Yeah. So the floor was covered with shag pile carpet. Remember that? So it was like a grassy floor, and people could go in and sit in the space and watch the video. But of course now with considerations of keeping it safe, we can't do that.
No, the conservators say no.
That's exactly it, right. I'm not the boss anymore.
But those environmental concerns that you identify within that work, then you go on to make many other works in this vein, and a really key work along that theme is Murray River Punch.
Yeah.
So the Murray River, which you'd grown up beside on the banks of, you make this performance work in 1980, which in itself it's a very Fluxus performance.
Yes. Yeah. I was invited to do the performance for a show called Women at Work, and I'd been in the Maya department store, and there was a woman doing cooking demonstrations. And she was all dressed up really neatly and chitty-chatting away while she's shown, everybody how to cook this thing that she at the end passed around and everybody could have a bit. And it just, I don't know, I think I'm a sideways thinker, something like that. Because, there's that, and oh yeah, and that, and yep, this, and oh yeah, yep, and let's put all that together. Yes, that's it. That's the way I think.
It's a great description of the work too.
Yeah, so I collected all this evidence of the pollution of the river and put them into little jars, and there was a turd poo-poo in a butter dish, and so on. And the recipe for Murray River punch, sorry about the pun, I can't resist it, was all the pollutants in the river. So all these people in the student union building at Melbourne University gathered around thinking that they were going to get some free food, I think. And it just smelt like you wouldn't believe. The whole building just stunk, and no one would take anything. No one would try it.
Oh.
Yeah. They did eat the cheese on toothpicks.
And now that work, of course, exists as a group of images and archives in documentation.
Yeah.
That's really how we can now encounter
Yeah.
that particular work. And you were also very concerned with archives and documenting and documentation from very early on, from the 70s as well. That really perhaps stemmed from your work with the Women's Art Register?
Yeah, maybe. I guess because so much of the work was ephemeral, I did document it. But as the George Peyton and Ewing Gallery in Melbourne University was the hub of contemporary art in the 70s. It was amazing, you know. And they started what was called a Women's Art Register after Lucy Lippard came and gave a lecture about what was happening with women's art in New York. And so anyone who was exhibiting in shows there could put work into the Women's Art Register. And a friend and I applied to the school's
grant. It was a
yeah,
grant
anyway,
system.
we applied for grants from the Education Department and got several grants and set up a Women's Art Register extension project. So we went to artists' studios, photographed their work, got material from them, interviewed them. We also researched historical women artists. My favourite was Margaret Preston. She was amazing. And put together these kits that were kept in the Richmond Library, and people could borrow them through the interlibrary lending scheme. So, you know, schools could borrow them and researchers could borrow them. Yeah, it was really great.
Well, and I suppose reflecting on how important these archives are in a similar way to the Sourris, you know, interview series now is just such an important archive of a certain place and a certain time. And the Women's Art Register is now the oldest archive of its kind in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, it's still going. It's wonderful.
Yeah, extraordinary. So the other big recent moment in recent years, Julie did the interview with you in 2019, and it was just a couple of years after you were included in Documenta, which is arguably the most important, you know, curated exhibition.
Yes.
And there we are,
Yes.
with one of the works, interior decoration.
Yeah.
So that occurs every 5 years in Germany, in Kassel. Can you, and you were you presented 2 major installations in different venues.
The Documenta 14 was split between Kassel in Germany and Athens, and so all the artists showed in both places. And I'd made this installation called Interior Decoration, and it was very personal. My father was a machine gunner in the Second World War, and he's the most amazing man. He was very... look, it wouldn't matter who you were, he would treat you the same. Wouldn't matter whether it was Queen Elizabeth II or a swaggy on the road, you know. He was just full of love for people, but he suffered from PTSD. So in many ways, family life was hell, You know, he used to just go off. And when eventually he stopped drinking, which helped. And when he was 92, we were visiting him, my daughter and I, and Marina was going off to Borneo, and I knew that Dad had been there at the end of the war, and I said to him, "Oh, what was it like, Dad?" And he started to tell us, and he started crying, and he was calling the Japanese soldiers the poor bastards. So he had compassion for the enemy, how he could sit there behind a machine gun and kill the enemy is beyond me, you know. And it still upsets me to think of how he was affected by that. And of course, being brought up in a soldier settlement town, I realised that we weren't the only ones having to deal with this, you know. Mum, fortunately, was a very strong woman. She was very enterprising, creative, and she kept the show on the road, you know. She ran the business, but poor old Dad. And so anyway, when I persuaded them to move to Sydney to be in an aged care place because they weren't coping, I just could not throw away their bedroom furniture. I was just really closely attached to it. It was like an emotional thing. And of course, Mum's a sewing machine. So my daughter and I brought it all to Sydney, and it's sat under the house. And I looked, to this day, I still can't remember why I thought of making I think the sewing machine turning into a machine gun started it all off. I had that idea, and the idea was to militarize the domestic and make the war domestics, because, you know, when the men came back from the war, they had to adapt to being a family. And my sister wrote this beautiful poem about how this strange man came into the house, and they had to call him Dad, and they didn't even know who he was, you know. So the Singer sewing machine was the first one, and it was bobby pins and Mum's Singer sewing machine. And then I made a trench out of their wardrobes, and a watchtower out of a double bed that was very much like theirs. I didn't have their actual bed. And around the walls, I put photographs of anything to do with war or trauma, and oops, sorry. And there was also sound in it. All of a sudden, you know, you'd be walking through it looking, and people came and told me all these sad stories, you know. All of a sudden there'd be from the sewing machine. So I had the sound of the Singer sewing machine in the trench. And, you know, it was like, yeah. So it was a very strong,
a very powerful,
evocative evocation of what happens in families, you know. Yeah.
a very personal work for you, but also it was shown in the context of this German city.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was
with its
fantastic
own historical legacy.
Yeah, it was such a great opportunity to contextualise it in Castle. The dado, it's called, you know, the images going around the wall were like a dado. And one of the previous documenter artists had inscribed the names of all the Jewish people who were, you know, sent off to concentration camp, labour camps, and I think only one person survived, you know. and their names were inscribed on the railway tracks where they were shipped out on the train. So he was very happy for me to put those names along the dado. Yeah, so it brought the context of castle into the work.
And at the other venue in Athens, you showed Plasticus progressus, which we
Yes.
have a couple of images up right now.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of, you know, this methodology of just pulling things from very different contexts and environments and reconfiguring them. You did this with Plasticus progressus as well as interior decoration. So tell us a little bit about.
Okay.
It's
well, yeah. I was treated like a princess. We went to Athens and Kassel to do research, and I just noticed all the garbage on the streets in Athens. You know, it was during the time when their economy just went crazy, and the infrastructure in the city, the collection of garbage was not not working too well. And I was also interested in the rivers there because they were full of plastic as well. And so I followed the rivers and took photographs of them. And the rivers all flowed down to the ocean. And when I got down there, I realised that people were, well, truckloads of plastic and garbage were being deposited down on the ocean. So plastic became, you know, the plastic pollution that we're trying to deal with became the theme that I followed. And of course, I live in Marrickville in Sydney, and the Cooks River goes near to where I live, and that was filled with plastic too. So I documented the rivers with the plastic pollution, and I went to places where the nature was still pretty much pristine, you know, nature reserves, national parks, and took photographs of the pristine nature, and made this natural history museum display set in 2000, I think it was 2057. So it was a futuristic diorama display in a natural history museum. And I created all of these creatures that eat plastic. They don't eat anything else, they just eat plastic.
Thanks to the CRISPR technology.
Yes.
There's a whole narrative about it.
Yeah. The genomes of ordinary animals like kangaroos, mice, cat, dog, you know, all these different animals, I think there are about 26 of them, were their genealogy was mixed with this bacteria that they discovered in Japan, and this is true, that was breaking down plastic. So these creatures were going to save us, save the environment. And so I'd be driving along the streets of Sydney, and I'd see a vacuum cleaner on the street, screech to a halt, run, throw it in the back of the car. And everybody was throwing out vacuum cleaners. It was just incredible. It was insane. So the one that you saw up on the display, that was Trump Pussy. Yes. And Trump Pussy was a combination of a cat, the creature in the sea that's got
cleaner fish.
Yes, with toxic stingray type thing. Anyway, yeah, so Trump Pussy was very fond of grooming itself, and yeah, so reminded me of someone.
Yeah.
Can't remember who it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a lot of them. This is the other thing that I have to tell you. I've got a terrible sense of humour, and it often comes through in my artwork.
Really?
But I think humour can draw people in and get them to look at things in more detail than they would if they were, you know, like all the animals were. They had a taxonomy that described how they reproduced, how you know, what they ate and where they lived, and blah. And so I loved writing stories as well, and I had so much fun with that
the
installation.
taxonomy.
It was so great. Yeah.
And so you presented the Plasticus progressus here at Griffith in 2019, and you added a whole section relating to the Brisbane River and the pollution. And we had a good couple of field trips, actually.
We did.
Going out into creeks and different waterways that feed into the river. And you're very playful and humorous, but you can also get away with quite a lot, Bonita, because I remember we drove out to some site, I think it was near Nudgee, and the road was blocked, and there was just people, you know, it was all blocked off. And I said, I don't think we'll be able to go. We'll have to find somewhere else to find some sites where we can photograph. And Bonita said, no, don't worry, I'll sort this out. She jumps over the barricade and said, no, we can go. If anyone comes along, I'll just pretend I'm just confused and disoriented, and we'll just make our way through.
Oh, gee.
So you've been able to use that to your advantage, I think, quite cleverly.
I'm naughty.
Yes,
Very
and
naughty.
a couple of other examples in terms of more activist-related works relating to mining sites and things like that. You've got this character in your back pocket that you can bring out to get you into certain sites.
I am a performance artist.
Well, and I think that the Menindee Lakes work, where you know, your Ophelia work of
wow.
laying down in that polluted, terrible environment of the fish kill, also demonstrates your, as Vicky said earlier, your willingness to put your body on the line, and to bring to our attention the urgency of these issues.
Yes. Yeah, I was driving to Menindee to see the fish kill. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do there. You know, I was thinking, why am I going there? And I was thinking, well, what I would love to be able to pull out of this is that it's us who caused this, you know, not the Aboriginal people. It was us whitey folk. And just out of, you know, up there, Millet's painting of Ophelia just popped into my mind, and I thought, that's it. I'm going to be Ophelia in the fish kill. And I'd contacted, you know, I'd booked a room in a motel, and I asked the guy if he'd, you know, find out if there was anyone in the town who I could talk to about the fish kill. And when I checked in, he said, I've put you next door to a woman who's been coming to Menindee for many years taking photographs, and she knows all about it, so, you know, just knock on her door. And I heard it drive up, and I gave her a few minutes to get, you know, settled, and knocked on the door. She opened it, and she's standing there with this giant professional camera in her hand. Because I was thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? How am I going to get it documented? And she, of course, thought it was an amazing idea. Her name's Melissa Williams-Brown. She's a professional photographer, and she took the photographs for me. Yeah, so, you know, everything came together.
Right
It's
place,
wonderful.
right time.
Yeah,
again.
exactly.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. Yeah.
There's a beautiful question on the Slido slides, and that is, do you hold out hope for our future on this planet?
Oh,
What a
okay. Look, one of the things that I've done in the past is researched animist cultures. And of course, you know, our Indigenous people, our First Nations people, their culture was animist. In other words, everything was kept in how can you
balance,
say?
harmony?
Yes, everything was in harmony. I became interested in Taoism because of that. And I also researched, you know, the ancient cultures in Europe, in China, Japan, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Warrnambool in Western Australia and was taken on these wonderful trips following one of the stories of the Nyatinjara people. And, you know, that's how you hold the place together, and we've just completely gone away from that. You know, the Industrial Revolution, as it's called, I guess was the beginning of it. Yeah, I don't know, consumerism, all of this is just crazy. I don't know, I can't look into the future without despair.
But artists like yourself just are also able to imagine different futures.
Yeah.
And what you've done in many of your works is to speculate on different scenarios, different kinds of teleologies and lines of flight through these issues. And I think that that's really an incredible characteristic of your practice, that you're able to imagine different futures for us.
Well, Dog Woman. Dog Woman's up there right now. One of the feminist issues that irritated me greatly was that women have had, and probably still have been, written out of history. It's all about men. Occasionally you get, you know, an empress or a queen, but, you know, what women have contributed it's just not there. And so I invented the Dog Woman. Mainly because I saw, well, it started off because I saw elderly women around my mother's age in the streets of Berlin with dogs, and hardly any older men. And I figured that they must have been the widows or women who never married, because so many of the German men were killed during the war, you know. So this wonderful relationship that we can have and also desire with other species fascinated me. And I invented the Dog Woman as an ancient mythological religion that underpins all religions. That was my premise. Here I'm giving a lecture about the history of Dog Woman and the religion and so on, and it was delivered like this: hoof, 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 hoof. Woof, 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 woof. woof, 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 etc.
In her language, obviously.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. And the research that I'd done, I'd gone to every single collection of art in Berlin and taken photograph of every single artwork that had a dog in it. So that was the slideshow that was being lectured about by Dog Woman. And I had a dingo pelt to put over my head. And the first time I did it, it was called Dog Woman Communicates with the Younger Generation, because I became pregnant in Berlin. And so I was teaching my unborn baby all about our culture by projecting the images of the dog woman's history onto my pregnant belly and up onto a screen as well, so that people watching the performance could see the images. Yeah.
And it's hard to think of anything more speculative or futuristic than Parenthood, isn't it?
Yeah, quite. Yeah.
But I think, Bonita, thank you so much.
We probably should.
I've been asking them as we go along.
Oh,
so
yes.
Yeah.
There's the older person question.
Oh, okay. Well, just a half a minute on that one.
Okay. All right. I've spent time in Vietnam and I've been venerated. Older woman, artist, professor. 3 amazing things that all this one person is. I'm just like, everywhere I went, I was, and oh my God, this is crazy, you know? Because, but I find it hard to imagine that I'm getting old. Sorry. It's hard.
No, don't. It's okay.
I'm still about maybe 38.
Good to know. That's
Something
good.
like
so
that.
we've still got lots more Bonita Ely works to look forward to. Well, thank you so much for your generous, wide-ranging, endlessly creative and capacious practice, Bonita. We are so lucky to have you as part of our art world, and to have all of your work and your continuing contribution in all sorts of different realms. And I hope that we've touched on just some of those this evening. Shall we all join together in thanking Bonita?
Thanks very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Anna Rownick, the Executive Director of Content and Client Services here at the State Library of Queensland. And I'm here to thank you, the audience, and Angela and Bonita. I think you'll all agree that we were very lucky tonight and we got to meet the artist. I wanted to thank Angela for your thoughtful questioning and process, and Bonita for your honesty and openness. And I don't think there's many artists that have also invented a religion. So that was pretty cool to find out about. As we mentioned earlier, there is a much longer interview that you can go back and partake. And this has been an extraordinary evening and an opportunity to hear more about your artwork.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very honoured to be invited, really.
And thanks to James and Marika.
Yes.
We might get Bonita to do
Lucky
the
door
raffle
prize.
We have a prize here tonight.
Oh, okay.
A lucky door. And the lucky door prize goes to
043.
043 and
E.
so if we come up to the audience, come up to the stand at the end of the evening, we'll show you what your prize is. So just to finish the event this evening, congratulations. As Vicky mentioned, it's the Meet the Artist exhibition will be open tonight. So if you visited, you can go in for another peek or come in for the first time. And of course, this weekend is our last weekend with some curator tours. So please take an opportunity to visit the exhibition before it closes. We have the pop-up shop outside. You'll receive a survey about the event in coming weeks, so please take the time to give us your feedback and any ideas about how we can make the ongoing events a great experience. And finally, our thanks to James and Marika for your ongoing support. Another thank you for Bonita and Angela for your time tonight. And I'll close with the announcement that today we confirmed our third speaker for Portrait of an Artist this year, and that will be Richard Bell, being interviewed by Michael Laird. So very excited to have that all sorted today, and that we have the opportunity to hear and meet with Richard. So that's on the 3rd of August, and the bookings are now open via our website. So thank you again, and have a great evening.